First of all, welcome. Thank you all for coming. This is the fourth Merkle Meets webinar that we've done, so it's part of a series. The other webinars have been recorded, so you guys can definitely check those out on our website at merklescience.com. Wanted to just see what the attendee list looks like. Cool, I think we can get started. So we have an exciting program scheduled here today. We have subject matter experts that will be talking about the NFT space, the checklist for what it takes to get a marketplace up and running these days, some of the financial crime risks that we've seen in the NFT space, and some key regulatory considerations that I know is on all of our minds. But before we jump into that, just want to do a quick intro to Merkle Science, the host of this webinar. So Merkle Science is a predictive Web3 risk and intelligence platform. We help financial institutions, crypto companies, and Web3 companies reduce financial risk as it correlates to AML, compliance, and fraud. So we basically have an intelligence platform that does transaction monitoring, that covers investigations, that covers all sorts of mechanisms on the predictive side that allow you to make better decisions as a crypto company or a Web3 company. So today we'll be talking about NFTs and specifically how those risks are increasing as the market has been exponentially increasing as well. So we've seen amazing growth over the past couple of months or the past couple of quarters. And along with that growth, you have new fraud vectors, new attack vectors, and a lot of different ways that these risks can appear to companies like crypto companies or Web3 companies. So the purpose of the webinar is just basically to go through some of those bullet points that we talked about. And then we will not be taking questions at this time, but try to use the Q&A there. And then if we have time, we'll try to go through some of those. And then we'll start off with some quick intros. So we have a panel today of a little bit of everything, a little bit of regulatory, a little bit of Web3, and we'll jump into the intro. So I'll start off with Parit Patel from Zash. Why don't you go ahead and give us a quick intro, a little bit about your background, and then we can pass it on to the next panelist.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Parit, CEO of Zash. Zash is an enterprise-grade NFT data provider for business. We provide on-chain data for building NFT data products and detecting risk. And I'll be doing a small demo later today. We work with businesses such as Binance and CoinMarketCap and others. My background was I was previously a CFO of a fintech where I oversaw compliance. So hope to add some value to the panel today.
Cool. Jerry, why don't you go next?
Hi, Jerry. Hi, guys. My name is Jerry. I'm CEO of Tatum, and my background is banking. I spent almost 20 years in banking, and in Tatum we help developers from Web2 space and bigger Web3 companies to build products. So Tatum is a developer tooling for developers, so they can build better products in Web3 space.
Cool, thank you. Thomas?
Hi, I'm Thomas McDavid. I look after financial crime compliance for Sotheby's. So those of you who are aware of our business, obviously we have a major auction house looking particularly at fine art. We also have Sotheby's Metaverse, which deals with our online NFT marketplace, as well as also offering a huge range of other options. So looking at this particularly from a compliance, but also regulatory, AML, sanctions controls, and how we deal with that. And we look at the broader NFT market.
Perfect, thank you. And last but not least, Stephanie?
Thanks, Neil. So yeah, new to Merkle Science, and really happy to be here. Eager to learn, brand new space for me. My background, I recently retired as an assistant special agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigations, a federal agency in the US. I'm bringing over 2 years of investigative experience in the investigative space, and also leading teams in the areas of money laundering, drug trafficking, financial fraud, cyber-enabled transnational organized crime, human trafficking, IPR violations, you name it. So toward the end of my career, and the reason why I'm really here that I built a team, in the field, really based on their energy and vision of my team members there. And I gravitated toward our cyber portfolio, and we were doing some really good work, and they're continuing to do some really great work, identifying and disrupting criminal hackers, illicit darknet marketplaces, and then crypto money laundering. So I'm kind of bringing that background into Merkle science, and happy to be joining the conversations. Thanks, Neil.
Cool, thank you. So thank you, panelists, and we'll jump right in. And before we start going into some of the deeper topics, I think it's very important to start setting the precedents. And I'll ask a very simple question, which might come with a variety of different answers, right? And I'm sure everyone on the call can have a different answer for this question as well. Let's start off with, what is an NFT? Now, we all know what it stands for. It's a non-fungible token, but panelists, I'd love to just get a quick one-liner on what you think an NFT is in your own words. So why don't we start off with Jerry?
In one sentence, for me, it's identity of product or service. I will talk about it a little bit later, but that's what it is for me now.
Got it. Thomas, what about you?
For me, it's a digital representation of either an artwork or another rights-based issue. Again, something that I'm sure we'll dig into deeper. How do we see it, and how do maybe governments and regulators see it? Often are two hugely different items.
Cool. Parrot?
The way I describe it is it's a non-equivalent asset. So I think one of the things with NFTs is that it's very easy to get into quite superfluous sort of representations, but really, if you think about it, you have fungible tokens and you have non-fungible tokens. Fungible tokens are non-unique, and non-fungible tokens are unique. And that can be physical assets, can be digital assets, it can be anything, it can be identity, but it's a unique representation of something on-chain.
Great. And then Stephanie, from your perspective, what do you think an NFT is?
Yeah, from my perspective, new to the space, it's the vast unknown. So looking forward to learning from my panel members. And also this week, I'm attending F Denver. So last night and then the next few days, I'll be learning from the experts in the field.
Cool, great. Now we're all warmed up. Let's talk about NFT marketplace development, right? So there's a lot of marketplaces out there. OpenSea is probably the most well-known. We want to jump into a little bit of what it takes to basically launch a NFT marketplace today. What are some of the things that are defining characteristics, tech stacks, in creating a marketplace, and specifically around the minting process? And I know, Jerry, your company focuses on that minting component. So why don't you start off and maybe give us a high-level overview of what it takes to really run or build a platform today?
Thank you. So we have about 140,000 projects on Datum. Out of that, almost 6,000-7,000 of them are NFT marketplaces. So we can see a lot of trends recently. And we have seen recent marketplaces like 2 years ago. And what we see today, it's very different. So first of all, 2 years ago, we have seen marketplaces where all people were minting NFTs before they actually sold the NFT. So if they created NFT, they minted a lot of, if they created NFT marketplace, they minted a lot of NFTs that cost a lot of money, right? Because they have to pay for the fees. Today, they're using something which we call lazy minting. It's basically a process where they mint when the actual artwork or whatever it is sold, which is cheaper. It also allows them to actually build NFT marketplace, something we call multi-chain. Basically, they just don't mint on one chain like Ethereum, but they can let the user decide, the buyer decide which network or chain he or she would like to use. And then usually they bill also the fee on top of that. So that's what we see a lot. When it comes to tech stack, it ranges from they build it from scratch. They use Datum or some other frameworks to get there pretty easily. Surprisingly, actually, it's a funny story, but one of our employees, he built NFT plugin to WordPress, and that's it's not nice. To be very honest, it's not nice plugin, but actually it's the most used in NFT space in WordPress. It's I think it's the first one in the world. It's being used a lot, and I don't understand why, but it is what it is. And so that's also option. Like, you know, if you're not a developer really, or you just want to test out the market, that's the way how you can do it in basically a day. So you can just spin WordPress website. So there are options for anyone to go live with NFT marketplace pretty easily.
Got it. Thank you. And apart from your perspective, like some of your clients are obviously, you know, these platforms, even exchanges. How do you kind of play with these marketplaces? What kind of challenges are you seeing, and where do you think the value really lies for a marketplace?
Yeah, great question. I think right now, you know, it's a very competitive space, and really, like, there's two areas where I feel that marketplaces will be able to differentiate in the long term. I think firstly, it's being able to attract creators. So, like, you know, NFTs all started with creators for projects. So, you know, musicians, artists, anyone that wanted to create a project. So really, can you provide value to them? Can you demonstrate that they're able to capture value in an authentic way? So I'm sure many of our audience know about the 0% royalties debate that currently happened. And really, you know, as long as creators are able to like monetize and have tools, I think that's going to be super important. I think secondly, you know, the use of tokens has been quite an interesting phenomenon that's happened with NFT marketplaces. So Blur did a token drop recently. So I think we'll continue to see ways to incentivize all participants, whether traders, creators, or others, on platforms. So really, I think, you know, those are two trends that we're keeping a keen eye on.
Got it. Thank you. And I'll shift to topics a little bit, going into some of like the legal and regulatory considerations. And Thomas, I know you're in a unique position, you know, being from Sotheby's and working on NFTs now as well. What are some of the considerations that an auction house like Sotheby's is taking into consideration, or what are some of the challenges that you guys see working with either marketplaces or trying to build your own marketplace?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting area when we think about marketplaces. And to Parit's point, who are we dealing with? Are we dealing with primary marketplaces for those creators? In which case, if we look back at, for example, what Sotheby's have done in the last year, we did a big Liverpool FC drop, working directly with creators to then sell them, versus what are the issues when you get into more of that secondary marketplace? Who is custodying these assets? And I think that's something that we're going to see increasingly in the regulatory landscape. There's a huge amount of talk around, are you in effect acting as a virtual asset service provider, a VASP? Are you stepping into that much more heavily regulated area of being a money transmitter? So in New York, you'd be required to get your BIT license from the NYDFS. In the EU, some of the major things we're seeing are, for example, looking at MiCA, the Marketing Crypto Asset Bill, which recently is passing through. Part 1 excludes NFTs, but will Part 2 include it? Again, it goes back to that question of what exactly is an NFT? What are you selling? And again, also in relation to 0% royalties, is there a smart contract built in at the creation that then gives a percentage of royalties? Are we treating these more like art-based assets, which in the UK and EU would have what's known as droit de suite, artist resale rights applied to them if the artist only died up to 70 years ago, whereas in the US you don't have that. Again, you have this huge sort of regulatory arbitrage across jurisdictions. And I think that's something that marketplaces are going to massively have to deal with, working out where are they based, where are their clients based, and who are they interacting with.
Got it. Thank you. Just to kind of start jumping into some of the risks associated with NFTs. So obviously there are, endless categories we can talk about. We can talk about market manipulation, wash trading, you name it. And I know, Part, you have a few slides that you want to show to the audience as well. So while we queue those up, and you should be able to share your screen as well. Stephanie, from your perspective, what are some of the things that, from a law enforcement angle, are considerations that marketplaces should be taking a look at, or some controls that they should start building in-house?
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's a really great question, because I don't think anyone out there wants to be, looped into a criminal investigation or targeted as as a money laundering mechanism for anybody in the criminal world. So I think really what's important is kind of knowing what the risks are, what the current criminal trends are, and then also having a really good compliance program that'll protect you, to have you kind of see if you're being exploited, or your system's being, or your entity's being exploited. So I think that's kind of where it lies, is being prepared, for potential criminal scrutiny, criminal liability, and then regulatory scrutiny.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So Part, over to you. Why don't we go through some of the slides?
Perfect, great. So yeah, as Neil mentioned, there are several risks that can be associated with NFTs. I wanted to just jump into a quick case study around wash trading. So yeah, to define this, so wash trading is a form of market manipulation in which a set of colluding users trade the same asset to create artificial activity. So this is kind of like a very simple pattern, where wallet one would effectively transfer an NFT to wallet two, potentially owned by the same owner, then to wallet three, and then back to wallet one. And why do they do this? So a couple of reasons. So firstly, it can be to inflate the volumes of a collection, A, to show a higher trading volume, or B, a trader might be trying to effectively manipulate the price to then sell it to someone else. And secondly, as I mentioned earlier, some marketplaces have now introduced their own token. So this can be an effective way because the way the tokens work is every time you make a trade, you effectively own a token, or you will be eligible for a token drop in the future. So obviously, the more transactions you can prove on a marketplace, the more tokens you can generate. And this is known as incentive mining. So, kind of a bit of background. So, wash trading isn't new. It's been illegal for almost a century in the US stock markets, since the Federal Commodity Exchange Act in 1936. So there is a precedent for this to be regulated. As I'm sure Thomas can talk to later, there's been some recent developments that would suggest that this is going to be the case. So unregulated in the crypto market, but this is changing. And some recent data that was released by June Analytics showed that 85% of Blur's volume was wash traded and 95% of LooksRare's volume. They took quite a sort of generous measure of the way they calculated it, but there is a risk, a tail risk posed to any platform that's interacted with a wallet, NFT, or trader involved with wash trading. So I sort of showed this one earlier, but something that we've been focusing a lot at Zash is what are other variants of this. So this was a research paper that was released last year. And as you can see, there are many, many ways that traders try and effectively evade detection methods that have been put in place. At Zash, we've basically brought this down into a few filters that businesses can effectively apply to understand what type of wash trading is occurring on their platform. So I wanted to kind of just go into a quick case study. So, everyone's favorite former US president did an NFT drop earlier on this year. And actually, it's ranking #1 still today on Matic on OpenSea. As you can see on the right, majority of the volume in the first 7 days came through OpenSea, but there was some small volume seen in other marketplaces. So through, running it through our algorithm, on the left-hand side, you can see 2 days, which spiked with daily wash trades between 40 to 60, and actually went up to as much as 11% of wash trades on that day too. And really the methodology that we or what we want to allow is for businesses really to make that judgment themselves. So how much do they care about false positives or false negatives? So we've built a series of filters to allow that. And maybe to comment on a couple, so self-funded accounts is basically cycle detection, but account to account transfers. So if I kind of skip back to here, if you take the one on the top right, as you can see, it's the same individual, but what they've done is they've funded 3 wallets to then be able to manipulate the price. And then the second is strongly connected components. So this is where you see intense wallet interactions. So an example here would be on the bottom right, and that can indicate a relationship between the wallets. So yeah, I guess to kind of recap on us, so we index 70 marketplaces across 4 blockchains. And yeah, if you have any questions after this, feel free to get in touch. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Cool, thank you. So I just want to turn it back to some of the on-chain data that's available, right? And so Jerry, on your side of things, right, what are some of the available kind of metrics or analytics that one can use from a marketplace standpoint to start looking at these types of volumes? And just from a marketplace standpoint, is there any specific things that you guys look for, like especially when it relates to like duplications of NFTs or royalties or accepting on-chain payments, especially as it relates to some of these like risk issues?
So what is the most interesting thing today for us is because we support about 70 chains right now. So we have access to a lot of data, and we also are scanning all the NFTs and all the metadata related to that and all the objects. That means that we can actually find out duplicates. That's a very good point, because very often NFT marketplaces, they would like to know if this is actually original piece or it's there like 100 times already. And so that's something which I feel is not being used that much yet, and we'll see more and more of that. When it comes to NFT data as such, of course, you can see in case of on-chain marketplaces, you can see all the transactions and you can do all the magic around, like Pari described. That's absolutely amazing work and love it. I would like to see more, actually. I don't have time for that today, I guess. And then we mostly work with basic data. So duplicates is the biggest topic right now we see as a developer tooling for NFT marketplaces. Otherwise, they can use more analytical tools like you guys are building. So that's more advanced than we can provide. That's not our layer.
Understood. Yeah, thanks, Jerry. And then now to just pivot a little bit into more of like the regulation and the compliance side, right? So the FATF, or the Financial Action Task Force, released a report this Monday. And Thomas, I know you've gone through it in detail. Would love to get your thoughts on the report itself and how it affects the UK market and then just the NFT market in general.
Yeah, so for those of you who aren't aware of FATF, it is the global regulator for FIUs, financial intelligence units. So for example, in the UK, that would be the National Crime Agency. In the US, it would be FinCEN, the HKJ FIU in Hong Kong. Released this report stating, looking at the art and antiquities market, one of the major areas they covered was NFTs. Now, the interesting point from my point of view is that we then get into this gray area of certain jurisdictions believe that NFTs are art. Others say, are they a securitization? Are they a financial instrument? For those of you who have looked into this before, the test that is most commonly applied is actually a US-based test known as the Howey test. It looks at 4 key components as to whether a digital asset, for example, is acting like a financial instrument or a security. But the FATF report comes in and says, no, NFTs really are digital asset, are pieces of art that should be treated, therefore, like artworks. However, the overarching theme of the report is that the art market should be further regulated. So in the UK and EU, the art market is regulated since January of 2020 under the European Union's 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive. But in a huge other parts of the world, it's unregulated. So you see this issue of jurisdictional arbitrage, individuals trying to be bad faith actors and get away with trying to launder money or be facilitators of money laundering, proceeds of crime, in jurisdictions where this isn't regulated. And I think this is one of the key areas that we are going to all have to adjust to, is not only what are we looking at in regards to NFTs, but something that, as my fellow panelists have mentioned about, actually that on-chain analysis of the flow of funds that are using to buy those NFTs. Are we using cryptocurrencies to pay for NFTs? In which case we need to make sure that we're screening those funds. Do we know where the money is coming from? If we're accepting fiat, who are our payment service providers? And something else we're seeing in the marketplace increasingly is a number of big crypto payment firms having their money service providers actually withdraw sort of third-party facilitation to them. So again, it's another huge area of risk. Are banks de-risking or are financial institutions de-risking in relation to the ecosystem that we're trying to operate in? And I think that really goes back to the initial premise of this whole panel about trust. How do we bring trust and how do we bring strength into our marketplace so people know that actually what they're buying, 1, exists, but 2, they're not inadvertently facilitating either money laundering, terrorist financing, human trafficking, certainly areas that I'm sure Stephanie looked at considerably in her previous role, and making sure that actually it is certainly no more high risk to transact with crypto or NFTs than if you're operating in the traditional either art or finance markets.
Great, thank you, Thomas. And the beauty of the blockchain is that there's tremendous transparency since everything is on a public ledger, right? You can follow an NFT movement from literally the day it was minted down to after 100 or 1,000 transactions and exchanging hands there. Curious to know your thoughts on how something like a sanctions implication for NFTs would kind of affect the marketplace, right? So obviously you have key countries like North Korea or Russia that are on these sanctions lists, right? And now you're also having these NFTs being minted in either marketplaces outside of the country or inside of the country, and then they're being used for various purposes. Whether it's money laundering is a separate question, but more so as it relates to sanctions, how do we, as an industry, get past being able to continuously use NFTs for the intended purpose versus trying to filter out some of these? What type of controls, and Stephanie, I'll open it up to you as well. What type of controls should we be thinking about, and how do we start de-risking and mitigating some of this, mitigating some of these challenges?
Yeah, that's a really,
Hi, Thomas.
I'm sorry. That's a really, really interesting point, and it's something that I know when I engage with law enforcement partners globally, they ask us, being not only having our NFT metaverse, but also accepting cryptocurrency on a wider point. And I think there are 2 key points that I would use to defend crypto and NFTs, is that 1, what we do is no different to how we would transact traditionally. Again, either if you're looking at sort of the finance industry, you need to do your KYC on your client. You need to know who you're transacting with. Do you have their ID? Have you run traditional screening against them? Are they a pet? Are they sanctioned? Do they have those sorts of criminal connections, for example? So you diligence that. And then you also diligence the transfer. You look at where has it come from? Where's the wallet it's come from? Where's it going to? Is there a high inflow of sanctioned funds into the wallet that is receiving this, for example? In which case that might indicate the source of funds, the source of where the money's come from to pay for the NFT is from a sanctioned group. And again, you mentioned North Korea, you mentioned Russia. This might also be more in relation to terrorist financing. Is it Iran? Is it Syria? Yemen, for example? Are those the bad faith actors that we're trying to look at? So there's definitely a role for the new technology that's coming on that looks at transaction monitoring. And again, we take that as an internal process, and also your KYC. So you're marrying up the old school, traditional compliance, financial crime compliance, KYC, client due diligence, enhanced due diligence, and the brand new tech to really actually make it a safer transaction than some of our traditional banking and fiat transactions that we see.
Yeah, and I would add, absolutely. It may seem overwhelming, but a lot of these tools and the framework exists to build your compliance programs. But I think that's why we're having this conversation right now. I think we're all on the same page as far as the, kind of creating that safe and healthy growth for this sector. And boosting overall confidence in the industry. So, it's a fact, we are currently seeing NFTs being exploited for money laundering and, being rife for the basis of, and some of the schemes that we're seeing out there, centered around fraud and theft. It's not going to go away. The volume is going to increase. The activity is going to, add to the vulnerability of the sector altogether. And it is going to be used, by criminal networks, to kind of, as a means to obfuscate the funds, as far as money laundering is concerned. So really, as Tom said, look to places like the FATF, who are putting out that guidance, kind of holding nations and industries' feet to the fire a little bit, hopefully a little bit more quickly than we've seen in the past. But other things you can do aside from having like a really robust compliance program, connect with others in the industry like we are today, seek out and absorb risk reports and intelligence bulletins. And then, establish a framework within your company to really understand, like Thomas said, knowing where the funds are coming from and going to, and setting up alerts, red flags, getting to know your customer.
Stephanie, follow-up question to that. And since you come from the industry, right? How aggressive, can regulators and law enforcement get when it comes to like things like sanctions or obviously, money laundering and things like that? Is this like right now it's just guidelines, right? When does it become a point where these hard rules and these like walls start, entering the industry? And then at that point, what's really the difference between the traditional fiat space and or TradFi and crypto? Because the whole point of, I think, like the crypto industry was that to move away from some of that regulation. And if we're kind of putting up the same practices and the same barriers, is it still worth doing? I would love your thoughts from that side.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So, regardless of where we are, as far as regulations are concerned, if you're a company, if you're an entity, if you are, willfully blind to what's going on and how you may be facilitating laundering of money or sanctioned entities, funds going through your systems, that's really what's putting you at risk. There's nothing, those are criminal elements at that point. We don't have to rely on regulatory, sanctions and regulatory scrutiny in those respects. So you really, if you are laundering money unwittingly, wittingly, willfully, blindly, if that's a word, you really are going to be a ripe target for criminal investigation. And I'll tell you that as I mentioned before, it's a different thing than being subject to regulatory scrutiny. You know, you're going to have, your business is going to be disrupted, your operations disrupted, and you could really kill your reputation. So, you know, being very careful about who you transact with and knowing where their source of funds are coming from is really going to keep you kind of in a better place. Challenges as far from law enforcement, just, you know, the ever evolving landscape and the technology. It really is, it's really difficult to keep up with the criminal trends. You know, there's, you know, a lot of very basic and simple investigative techniques can be applied to, you know, kind of following the money, peeling back source of funds, and, you know, finding the entities that are facilitating the money laundering, but really getting, you know, having an investigator or investigative team have the skills to be able to understand it and explain it and you know, show that it's you know, evidence in court, you know, to criminally prosecute and disrupt operations. That's an entirely different thing that, you know, some agencies are investing in more heavily than others, that training piece. But really forums like this are amazing. And I hope there are some law enforcement folks out there and things, you know, like the conferences and the other industry forums, you know, I was at an event last night in Denver and new space for me, completely new culture. And when it was almost really hard to connect with some of the folks because they, you know, once you said you have a background in federal, you know, criminal investigations, you know, that was a little bit hands off and skeptical at the time. So don't be afraid of engaging. Don't be afraid of, you know, partnering with law enforcement. I mean, because we really are on the same page and want to, you know, create this safe infrastructure.
Do they immediately run out of business cards once you say that?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't make
God,
a
I
lot
just
of
gave my last one.
Neil, if I can, I would like to just add that
Yeah, of
I
course.
sympathize with Stephanie. I think most of the builders we see are being overly optimistic. They don't think about the consequences. I think what just Stephanie said, they should hear every day, at least twice, again and again, because I don't think they really always consider all these factors in when they are building something. They think of that like, I'm doing some amazing technology piece and I'm hopefully being great business. And I know that a lot of crypto projects are like, you know, let's build it and then, you know, apologize later. But, you know, in this space, I think we are kind of already ahead of, we should not do that anymore. I mean, it's not 2013, 2015 anymore. So definitely they should learn more from Stephanie and similar guys.
Yeah, Jerry. So quick question on that, right? So as a builder, right, these become challenges in your products, right? These become moments of friction or from onboarding, and it sometimes reduces conversion, especially going to Thomas's point. Like if you're starting to do KYC on every single person that goes on your platform, right? It does become somewhat of a hindrance, right? So that's why I think like you're gonna see just like lower volumes, if you will, for exchanges that have, you know, these KYC or that are highly regulated. From your perspective, like, does this, you know, seriously impact these marketplaces in terms of the volumes that they should be expecting, or do you think more so, putting these checks and balances in place only helps scale the platform, if you will?
I don't think they are thinking, in most cases, they are thinking about it this way at all. They basically don't consider, some of them are doing KIC, not all of them. Some of them are trying to relocate to some locations where they feel being safe. And some of them, they just don't realize that there is necessity for that. So unfortunately, I don't see that trend that much. My best guess would be 10% of them understand perfectly, maybe less. 30% of them might have an idea that they should do something like that, but not exactly what, and the rest they don't care. They believe in decentralization. There's no responsibility. So that's that.
Got it. Thank you.
And I think
Thomas, you want to do?
Yeah, just following up on that, I think that's also a really good point about, do they see it as a hindrance to their business? Well, I think the industry more widely has already been put on notice now. We only have to look at some of the recent examples of either companies having their licenses suspended or just going bust entirely. And I think that's really what we have to learn from as either compliance professionals, specifically in this space, that we actually need to build with the intent. A great advantage that we have is actually we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's a huge amount of work already being done for us, and actually where can we piggyback off? If we go back to sort of the issues that major banks had, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, we can learn a lot from their failures to implement a program at the beginning. And in their cases, the institutions were 100 years old before the regulations came in. When you build a platform with that as an integral part, one, you're going to have the trust of your clients, but two, you're going to have the trust of your regulators. Are you better off having 1,000 clients for a month or having 100 clients for 20 years? And that's the sort of idea that I would certainly argue, that you're better off building it correctly and having the longevity, rather than, are we just going to see 30 new marketplaces a month, they're each going to have a spike and then they just get closed down. OFAC in the US do not care if you're technically a regulated market or not. If you're breaching sanctions, they will come, they will find you. There's so much extraterritorial reach in any of these legislations, whether it be EU, UK, US, but they will come, they will find you. I'm sure Stephanie will be able to say, I certainly deal with a lot of law enforcement partners. They do not care where on a map you're located. If you've touched $1, the US will try and argue jurisdiction. If it's touched £1, the UK will try and argue jurisdiction. And you just end up in the middle of it, and they will tell you you've got to cease trading.
I can also add maybe the other side of the coin. And we also have projects which are being scrutinized by law enforcement. They actually cease to exist given the pressure and bad reputation, of course. And then actually the investigation end up like, well, they actually did nothing. So it's not always, it's not always that easy for both sides. And as Stephanie pointed out, both sides have to learn more, what they should actually do, and don't destroy each other as well.
Great, thank you all. So the next question I had was more along the lines of like, can NFTs be used as financial instruments? But I think the consensus here is that yes, they can. So let's maybe talk about some of the implications, right? So what does this mean for consumer protection laws? What does this mean for lenders? I'd like to open it up to the panel. So Thomas, if you want to start, or Parit, if you want to start from your end, what do you think this means for the general consumers as well?
Happy to have a brief stab at this. In terms of lending, there are two major items that I would certainly flag and look at. Well, three actually, now I think about it, is one, what are you really lending against? How do you store an NFT to make sure that it's not sold on? So that, for example, in traditional art-backed lending, you would often physically take ownership of the property. Sotheby's has a very large sister company called Sotheby's Financial Services. We do a huge amount of art-backed lending. So it's an area that I'm fairly well versed in. NFT-backed lending, I can think of one example last year that an NFT was to be sold at Christie's, and they pulled it from sale just before it was meant to go up on the block because they'd managed to fund it through an art loan instead. I think the company off the top of my head was Liberty Capital. But then how do you custody that? How do you make sure that there are no liens on that property? The infrastructure that you would traditionally use isn't quite in place. Lots of art-backed lending, increasingly we see, is it going to be sort of buy now, pay later? In the UK, there's a big issue with a company called Klarna who do buy now, pay later. Is that sort of consumer finance? What sort of checks are we doing on the individual? My third point really is the NFT market. We've seen sort of peaks and troughs. You need a bit more of a level playing field. Yes, we've obviously seen it in the property market. We go back to the 2007 recession where there's this huge fall in prices. Is there enough confidence from the banking industry and from the financing industry that they would say, we are happy to start lending in this space? Or are you going to have individuals who are lending, in which case you open yourself up to the whole range of loan sharking, racketeering, and items like that, which I just don't see personally at the moment. The industry is mature enough and has the controls available that it could deal with that. However, we've seen a rapid change and rapid growth in analytic tools within the crypto space. So that's a problem at the moment. You might find in 3 months, if it does open itself up, that actually we can solve all of those problems.
Great, thank you, Thomas. And then Parrot, over to you. Any additional comments there on the what this means for consumer protection laws for lenders, or anything as like on the financial, using NFTs as a financial instrument kind of?
Yeah, sure. So I guess kind of, to give some context, one of the, like, despite, being in an NFT bear market, one of the like verticals that's seen significant growth has been lending. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the fact that you have a lot of, people basically holding NFTs and they're trying to release liquidity. So like in the same way you'd have an art dealer, a high net worth individual that, needs to release cash. We've seen that happen across NFTs at scale. And, there's a couple of, big lenders operating in the space like NFTify and a few others. And, the second reason is that, people are effectively taking positions as borrowers or lenders, kind of expecting or betting on kind of those relationships and the interest yield that you can make off it. But yeah, I mean, these are basically like growing markets. So the financialization of NFTs is on the up. And, there's also traditional lenders that are now entering into the space because there's an opportunity. And, I guess a belief that we have is as more and more non-equivalent assets are being moved on chain, there's a greater opportunity to lend against those. So, we've seen experiments with like mortgages, real estate, material physical assets being brought on chain and minted as NFTs. So all of the same laws will apply that apply currently to any lender in the space. So, everything from treating your customers fairly to retrieving the funds, the debt recovery process. And what I would say is, you can almost break this into the what and the how. So, what kind of advice I'd give to, anyone in the space right now is understanding and quantifying the risk is step one. And then step two is how do you then, implement controls and act on it. And I think, the how isn't completely figured out yet because the legislation is still moving. But I think, what we do, what Merkle Science do, like, on-chain analytics is a way for businesses to basically understand that.
Great, thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left. I'm gonna leave a few minutes for questions as well. But let's talk about some of like what does the future look like for NFTs, right? So obviously there is ups and downs. I know OpenSea's volume has dropped by 90%. It's slowly going back up. But from a use case standpoint, from from what the future looks like, Jerry, I'd love to start with you and understand, what are some of the trends that you're seeing, from the dev side, as well as some of the, implementations of NFTs, the various types of tokens, and some of the use cases that you've kind of come across that you think are, going to kind of lead the future for NFTs.
Yes, so when it comes to the innovations, when it comes to NFTs innovation on a technical side, what we see a lot is increase of something we call ERC 1155 and those extensions. basically, it's about ability to tokenize the actual NFT. Because right now, if you are selling NFT, and especially if it's being a little bit more expensive NFT, and not everyone is that rich, not everyone can afford to buy that. So tokenization can allow you to basically create shares for that given NFT, and we can buy just one share. We can buy 10% of that NFT. So that way, you can have more owners. Of course, it will create a lot of issues based on what we are talking today, especially when it comes to tracking and all those things Parit and Thomas and you guys mentioned, right? But so that's going to be interesting to follow. And then we also see use cases which are more outside of traditional NFT space we are seeing today. So we are seeing digital car IDs as NFTs, even technologies like sharing cars and for like 2 hours you just issue NFT, it expires in 2 hours. Those things are being in development right now. What I like a lot is idea of identification of people. Basically, you go through standard KYC process, then the provider issue NFT, non-transferable NFT, which says this person is over 21 years old, for example. So you have it in your wallet, and then you can go to any website, any game, for example, you are playing, and the game operator knows you are over 21, and he doesn't need to do KYC because he trusts the provider of the KYC, right? So today you have to go through the KYC process on every single website, or yeah, you have to go through that. With that, you don't have to do that. As long as they accept this provider as a qualified, you're fine. So there are a lot of use cases outside of art, which we will see in the very near future.
Got it. Thank you. And I know you touched a little bit upon non-transferable tokens as well. I know Part, you wanted to talk a little bit about the soulbound side of things. Can you just maybe give the audience a quick overview of what that means for from a technology standpoint, and then what some of the potential use cases would be for a soulbound token?
Sure. Should I take that one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
perfect. So identity verification is a issue in many different use cases, but to take one, many people in the underbanked or under collateralized world can't get access to a bank account. So with the availability of on-chain data, you effectively have a record. If you have a record, it means you potentially could be eligible to get a loan. So what soulbound tokens and Vitalik, founder of Ethereum, wrote a lot on this, was effectively a way to tie off an on-chain identity to a non-equivalent asset, i.e. an NFT, and use that for a way to empower yourselves financially. Then in the developed world, just to kind of take an anecdote, I passed through, I think it was an airport in Central America recently, and I got checked twice on either side of the border. And, the same passport check happened multiple times. There's an obvious use case for blockchain for that. Of course, the hard work is needed to build partnerships up with every local government. And, I hope to see builders doing that in this market. But, identity is just an obvious, costly, time-consuming pain point where I feel that blockchain has a really important role to play.
Great, thank you. And then Thomas, I'll just pass it over to you. What are your thoughts on the futures of NFTs? What are some of the top trends that you guys are seeing from either from your research or from the institutional side? Yeah, would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think there are certainly a lot of interesting use cases. One of the ones we're seeing particularly from the art market perspective, is actually tokenization as a form of provenance research. So again, you attach a token to a painting, and that could be an old master painted 500 years ago. And then anytime you sell it, the NFT transfers. Again, it's immutable, so it gives you a really good provenance record. I think from the wider industry perspective, I think we're going to see the increase of phygital, sort of these ideas that maybe you buy a watch and you get an NFT attached, or do you buy an item and you get something for your avatar? But again, more widely, you go to a concert, do you then get minted an NFT to show that you went to that concert and things like that? I think experience as well. In the tourist industry, everything's about experiential travel. I think we're going to have experiential NFTs too before too long.
Great, thank you, Thomas. And then Stephanie, I think we'll close it out with you. We have about 2 minutes left. I know we've talked about a lot of different examples, a lot of different use cases for NFTs. Regulators are going to have their hands full, right? Looking at all of these different use cases, there won't be a single solution or single guidance that will kind of cover all of these different types of use cases as well. Would love to, just get your final remarks on how, marketplaces or even, Web3 companies can work with regulators to kind of not only educate them, but also come to middle ground in understanding how to formally, provide some type of guidance or provide regulatory clarity around this. Any thoughts that you have from your experience?
Yeah, fair. Although I am going to kind of go off on a tangent here because Parrot's experience, cross-border experience, if anyone out there, feel free to pick this up. But I think blockchain could be very relevant when we're talking about international trade. I mean, there's undervaluation, overvaluation, trade-based money laundering, counterfeiting. I think that, kind of applying blockchain to international trade really has a place in the future. So pick that up. Going back to your other question, I think it's all about communication, kind of everybody coming together, having the conversations, through the FATF, through informal forums, and really kind of getting on the same page. There is a lot of buzz and energy and momentum in the industry. And the regulatory framework's not there. Law enforcement might not have the tools to kind of keep up and address it and close those vulnerabilities. So a call to action, all of you out there, my co-panelists, you guys are going to play an integral role in maintaining the integrity of this industry and creating confidence and putting it in the right place for the future. So that's what I have to impart upon all of you and empower you all with.
Awesome, thank you. So that concludes our time. Just want to thank all the panelists. Thank you all for participating and sharing some of that knowledge. Thank you, participants, for attending. We do have a NFT crime report that will be going out on Monday. It'll be available on social media. Take a look at the Merkle Science Twitter or the website. But until next time, we'll send the link out for the next meetup.